This is another new one that I hadn't heard about. I don't think they're very well known. He's very well known, at least outside of Scotland. Um, I listened to a podcast on YouTube called British Murders, um, and he talks about a lot of murders in Britain, obviously. And he had a hard time finding any information, and so when I looked into it, because I'm a big true crime uh, fan, I like learning about true crime. Um, I had never heard of this case, and it's fairly hard to research. So, but I'm going to try. And I may pronounce some of this stuff wrong, but I specifically heard him say Iain Scoular. It's spelled a little different. It's Iain. That's his first name, but it's pronounced Ian. Scoular is spelled Scoular. In case you want to look this case up yourself, he's a convicted Scottish double murderer, um, and he was controversially released in 2003 after serving out his prison sentence. Um, there's not a lot of background information about his early life. They know that he was born sometime around 1958. That's um, uh, known, but not exactly the day or even the month, but just the year. We know he did poorly in school, and he was a loner and was prone to depression. Um, when he became an adult, he worked as a forklift truck driver. Even when he was in his 20s, he was still living with his parents. That, just for context, that's not unusual now, but back in the 70s and 80s, it very much was. Um, I grew up, I was born in 1978, so about 20 years after him. And I took care of my mom, but there were times when I lived on my own. And I always paid my own bills and stuff, except for when either her health was so bad she couldn't work, or my health was so bad I couldn't work anymore. But, and I had to get on disability. Um, but because I think if I was a man, people would have looked at it different. And also, if she hadn't been sick, people would have looked at it different. But it was to keep her from going into a nursing home. So that's just a little bit of perspective on that time frame, because that would have been late 1970s, early 1980s. My sister is 10 years older than me, almost 11 years older than me, and so in 1985, 1986, well, she graduated in 87, and she was 19, but she was expected to live out on her own, and the once or twice that she had to move back in, it was, okay, when are you going to be back out on your own? It's different now in 2020, and I think there's pros and cons to that, but just to give you an idea, it wasn't the norm back in the late 70s, early 80s. Now, I was a child during that time, but I remember it, and it just wasn't something that was done as often back then. Um, uh, his mother seems to have been quite overbearing if he was out too late. Now, keep in mind, he was a grown man. My mom, when my brother was still living with us after my dad died, when he moved to the town we had moved in, that was about an hour away, she was like, if you're not home by a certain time, I'm in bed, so that door's going to be locked, and you better not be knocking on that door to wake me up. Now, if you want to stay out, you're a grown man, you can stay out, but if you want to come back, I think the time was 10 or 11 at night, then you come back within that time frame, or you're out until in the morning when me and my daughter wake up. So that wasn't normal for back then, and the way she handled it was the way most parents handled it. But if he was out too late, she would get into her car and go out to look for him. On the night of November 31st, 1982. So he would have been around 24-ish. Scoular attacked Catherine McCord, a 36-year-old taxi driver, stabbed her to death, stuffed her body into the trunk of her car. Afterwards, he took a cigarette lighter, an inhaler, and her car keys from her purse and laid them in a neat line in the back seat. Because McCord had served time in prison for fraud, the police incorrectly suspected that she may have been killed due to some connection to organized crime. And of course, that wasn't correct, but they didn't know that at the time. 2 months later, Scoular attacked Elizabeth Walton, 48, on the grounds of her daughter's school. She was killed more brutally than McCord. Scoular beat and kicked her, stripped her, strangled her to death, and mutilated her corpse. Afterwards, he tied her clothes into neat knots and laid them in a straight line next to her body. He tried to lead the authorities off his track and onto something and give them false leads. And he approached them and lied about having seen a strange man near the crime scene before the time of the murder, the approximate time of the murder. Luckily, this was his downfall because witnesses placed him at the scene at that time. And they learned about his history, the police did, and they started investigating him as well. Not a lot's known about his past. It may be something that we can't see, but the police can. I don't know. Something that's not well known, in other words. But they would have access to, maybe. Sorry, I'm sleepy, but like I said, this is the end of June, and I'm trying to get as many videos as I can to at least the mid of August. So that way, when it's hot here in a couple weeks, because it will be hot 24/7, I won't have to try and make videos. During questioning, he claimed to have been home by 11 p.m. When he was questioned by the police, which was the time of the murder. But when they talked to the mom, because she was concerned about her son and their interest in him, she revealed that he hadn't come home until 1 a.m. Maybe she shouldn't have been so eager to get involved in her son's life. But anyway, that was 2 hours after the murder. So, he kept changing his story as more and more witnesses came forward that had witnessed him at the crime scene. They may not have seen the murder. It doesn't say whether they saw the murder or not, but they saw him there where it happened. Then Scoular's mom brought up the murder of Catherine McCord At the time, they didn't know they were connected, and that made them start connecting the dots. They realized that they were linked. They had some, like he lined up things, um, like the items he lined up in a certain way, like I just mentioned. Both murders were committed by someone left-handed, which he was left-handed. Both were committed not far from his home, which is typical. It was even more suspicious when they found out he'd lied to his fiancée about where he was at the time of McCord's murder, and witnesses linking him to the crime area as well. When hairs from McCord's jacket were found on a pair of Scoular's paints, he was charged with both murders. Trial began in May of 1983 and lasted only 2 weeks. Scoular showed no physical reaction to what was said during it, not even when the psychiatrist called him a psychopath. Except for when they said he was also sexually impotent. So that made him upset, I would imagine. Ultimately, Scoular was sentenced to 20 years in prison. So he served his 20 years, but, he brutally murdered 2 women, so that's not enough time. And I'll be honest with you, here in the United States, you would tend to get more than that, especially where I live. It's one of the things I like about the area where I live. If you commit a crime, you're going to pay for that crime, especially something like murder. So he was released to the, and everybody was upset by that, and I understand why. He went to live with his widowed sister. He has been a free man ever since. Hopefully he's not killed anybody in the almost 20 years he's been released. Let's see, he's probably in his 60s now, so he's probably not. He could kill somebody still, but it'd be harder on him. And I can only hope that he hasn't killed anybody since 2003. Both of Scoular's victims were women in their 30s or 40s. He would kill them brutally and violently. The first victim, McCord, was killed by stab wounds to the neck and chest. The second victim, Walton, was kicked, beaten, strangled to death, and mutilated. Scoular's signature was his habit of taking the victim's clothes and possessions and laying them in a neat, straight line near their bodies, like I talked about. Those are his only 2 victims. September 30th, October 1st, 1982, Catherine McCord, 36. She was 36. She was stabbed through their rear neck and 3 times in the chest. December 2nd, 1982, Elizabeth Walton, 48, strangled, beaten, and mutilated. So that is the murderer convicted murderer Iain Scoular. If you like my videos, please like, subscribe, share, and have a nice day. I'm going to keep doing these because this is more for me than how many viewers I get. I hope that I eventually grow, but if I don't, I don't, I'm doing a lot of this for me. It gives me something to do throughout the day, now that I don't have as much to do. And I obviously can't do them every day, but it gives me a pastime. So, with that said, I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Bye.